You are very welcome back to the show no more. Loads of people laughed at Mrs. Doyle's obsession with tea. But listen, I think we have a love affair with tea for a long time.
We certainly do. It really is an art form, I suppose, the cup on tea. And tea, really, it does hold a special place in Irish culture. And to chat about the history and the costumes, of course, associated with the nation's favourite brew is folklorist and, of course, one of our great friends on the show, Shane Mahan. The nation's favourite. Our favourite and the nation's favourite, Shane Mahan. Shane, brilliant to have you with us.
Well, listen, great to be here. I was thinking of it. Marv Gante, Marv Latte,
Marv Gante.
Yeah, that's
and
it.
do you know that we'd be dead without it, really? Tea. I'm amazed with all the cappuccinos and macchiatos and all people drinking different things. We're still the second biggest, I think Turkey are ahead of us, but the second biggest consumer of tea in the world. Per capita. Unbelievable when you think about it,
Yeah.
But tea wasn't always here, and that's really what's interesting.
When did it come?
It comes in from the 1700s to the 1800s, early 1800s in Ireland. Very much an elitist thing for the big house and so on. But what happened is that this was a commodity. People were making money out of tea. And tea is a little bit of, it's not quite a drug, but people get addicted to the tea, And therefore, after the famine, we have this incredible sort of movement where people are pushing, peddling tea. We had a fellow called the tea man, the way you had the bread man and the milk man, the tea man long ago. There was fellas could make money by coming into people's houses, both in the urban and the rural areas. And they'd give you tea, they'd present it, here's your pound of tea for the week or 2 pounds of tea. And then, of course, they'd give it to you on tick and they'd come back the next day, you mightn't have all the money.
Like a drug dealer.
Yeah, absolutely. This is what it was like.
The drug of the nation.
They hated the tea man. The tea man was despised because he was always looking for money, And of course, they were consuming more tea than they could pay for.
Yeah.
And there was all sorts of stories about the tea
And I'm
man.
sure as well, Shay, there was probably different gradations of tea.
Oh,
Big houses probably had a good, strong tea, and
but
the rest would have the dirt at the end of it, the loose kind of
and
ends.
bits of leaves and bits of dirt and everything. But what was really interesting is that people knew that tea was an elitist thing, status thing. And some people in Ireland had no idea in the world how to make tea. Mm-hmm. And in some of the accounts that we have, particularly the stations now, the station master when the priest was coming, what would happen is that you'd be told, you have to have tea for the priest, you see. So they'd go away and they'd buy the tea, but the woman never made tea in her life. And she might put down a pound of tea into the skillet and boil it up, and she'd strain it out, put it up in a plate with a knife and fork and bread and butter and hand it up to the priest. And the priest would say, the priest would say, did you throw out the soup, he'd say, because that was the kind of the idea. So our great love affair with tea, in the beginning there are lots of accounts of it not being so great.
So you were posh so if you had tea back those
Oh my
days.
goodness, that was the elitist thing. And there was another lovely story about a man he went into it was one of the fair days, he went into an eating house and he hadn't a word of English, you see, and he sat down, he asked for porridge, and the girl anyway said no, but she felt sorry for him. She thought she'd give him a cup of tea. So she poured out the cup of tea, put it on the milk and sugar and everything, and put it out. Well, he drank it back. He thought it was absolutely fantastic altogether, and he kind of intimated that he'd have another cup. So she said, okay, he's into this now. She brought down the tea, and she brought the sugar and the milk beside it, and she said, milk and sugar to taste, you see. And anyway, he drank back the tea without putting it, and God, it was awful old stuff altogether. And he went back to her, and he says, on cake, the first one was great, he says, but I didn't like milk and sugar to taste at all. That was his sort of idea.
But all of that is very funny because obviously tea comes from all over the world, but in India now they would not ever put milk or sugar in tea. That would be a sacrilege.
I think in Ireland, tea is an excuse for milk and sugar.
It is. But I think it's because we didn't have the best of tea in the beginning. Sure, we didn't. We weren't.
So you're trying to cover up the taste of it, is it?
But you know what I love, Maura, is that if I call up to my friends now or anything like that, when we could call up to friends, obviously we can't now.
Yeah.
But the first thing I walk in the door and I say, you'll have a cup of tea. And of course, naturally, this is the ritual now. I'd say, no, I'm fine. I'm glad. And of course, I love a cup of tea. And they'd say, no, go on, have a cup of tea. A bit like Mrs. Doyle idea. That's why that's so funny for us. But I must refuse. There's no point in saying, I'll have a cup of tea. And they'd say, look, leave the kettle on.
That's kind of being rude, really, isn't it?
It is. And if a fellow went off and made a cup of tea for himself and didn't ask you, it would be the height of rudeness when you think of it, But the thing is, you say, I'll have one out of my hand. That's
out of the hand,
the idea. But what's most important is that most of us now are using tea bags.
I know,
I don't like.
To be honest,
I bought a teapot during the summer.
Have you gone back to the other way?
Oh my God, the tea. It's unreal. The difference is unreal.
And it is unreal because nobody really had a cup of tea long ago. We always had a pot of tea. And I brought in, because I think people will remember this, I think we should slow this down now and do this properly, because people need to know how to
Well,
make the pot.
actually,
Yeah.
people probably don't.
Yeah.
Because most people would use tea bags, Shane.
Well, the most important thing is you had to have the pot, as
Yeah.
Stotty said. But very importantly, before you ever went near the pot, the water had to be boiling, had to be
Yeah.
hopping off the range. There was
But-
no good putting in.
Would you put hot water in to clean it out
Well,
first?
the first thing, you put the first straight away,
Yeah.
put in hot water, you scald the
Yes.
pot.
Scald,
it.
that's
Yeah,
my
yeah.
scald.
And there was this kind of, when I was young, it was my job to make the tea. So, like, I was very proud, but I had to do it properly. So you scalded.
Yeah.
My dad used to go crazy if we didn't scald the
Yeah.
Yeah.
pot.
Oh,
Yeah.
you did? So everything had to be hot. After that, then you had to get the tea caddy. And this was the old caddy.
Yeah,
I'd
I
say
had
when
one of
people
those.
see this,
Oh my
they hear,
God.
this is like a real
Oh.
nostalgia trip. And it's a fantastic tea caddy. And in there was a spoon. And that spoon lived
I
in
know,
the tea
yeah.
Yeah, it's staying in,
It
you're right.
wasn't
Yeah.
anywhere else, because this is where the alchemy then comes in.
Yeah.
You
Yeah.
had to work out how many spoons to put into the pot, we'll say,
Yeah.
right? And you were working out, you were looking around at who was there.
Was it a spoon
And-
each?
Yeah, a spoon each, and then one for the pot.
And
was
one
the
for the
usual-
pot. Yeah,
was,
yeah.
was the after part.
Yeah.
So you poured in the hot water, and after that, then this was the other part of the mystery. You had to leave it draw.
Leave it draw. Yeah.
Draw was the term.
Even
and,
the word,
Yeah.
even the
Yeah.
terminology
Yeah.
was
Yeah.
fabulous.
But you're
isn't
drawing
it?
the flavour out of it. Isn't that,
Yeah.
that's where it comes
and you
from.
see, there was a difference between having it drawn properly and having it stewing.
Yeah.
Yeah, no,
If
that's
you-
awful
No, no.
doing.
But
Yeah.
if you stewed
Because the
tea-
tannins would come out and it was
Oh,
awful.
yeah.
Yeah.
Right, when you think
But you
about
have no
it.
fire under that now. You're just
No,
leaving
no.
that draw.
Well, now some people would have the old
You might have
stain,
it under range.
stainless steel
lightly,
one
wouldn't you?
on the even on the
Mm.
gas. You'd have the black mark going up the side of the stainless
Yeah,
steel
yeah.
teapot that was there. And some people then would have the tea
Tea
cozy,
yeah.
and you'd leave it there. Then there was a whole other part of the ritual, about putting in
Okay,
when
okay. So how long do you leave it draw for? This is
Well,
the question I would
yeah.
say.
I would say in around 5 minutes.
That's
That would
the
be, that would
exact
be-
time, apparently. Yeah.
Do you know the worst thing of all that you could do, Daddy, was to pour out weak tea. God
Worst,
almighty
yeah.
tonight. And if some they'd clatter the cup down, and you'd have to start the whole thing again. That was the way it got.
Right, go ahead,
You know,
you were
there
allowed
was-
to be
there was,
like
you know,
that, dramatic.
that
Yeah,
bloody
yeah,
tea
yeah.
was it. But I think what was interesting as well then is some people used to put the milk in first. Now, there's all
yeah.
sorts of things. I have an old mug here, we call it an old
Oh,
cup,
I love
and
that.
they were
Love
really
that,
beautiful.
yeah.
Yeah.
But funnily enough, when people actually were drinking tea very regularly, you had the saucer as well, even when you were setting the table.
Even in regular houses, would that
regular
happen?
houses,
Yeah.
there
Okay.
was, if you were moving up the line, and the old dressers then go,
Yeah.
the cup and
Yes,
saucer.
actually,
Yeah,
you're
you
right.
would,
You'd have them
yeah.
hanging on the hooks of the saucer
Yeah.
behind.
I think the other one that we'll all remember is, of course, the fellas who were having the cup of tea, and
Oh,
of course they had the saucer, they'd pour it out,
Yeah.
and they'd be drinking from the saucer.
Shane, you are bringing back so many mad memories. I remember the
Yeah.
old kind of
Yeah.
people
Yeah.
doing that.
But and I think it was the great John B. Keane, Billy's father, who said, like, why should we scorn the man who drank out of the saucer? He said,
I know,
because
yeah.
you know what, wasn't it very practical if the tea was
Yeah.
too hot? And,
Yeah,
what,
yeah,
you know,
down,
this
And
was
you know another thing is fascinating, because I remember this years ago it was my father's uncle's house. He'd have 2 cups if he didn't have much milk.
Yeah.
And you'd be putting the tea from one to the
Oh,
other.
yeah,
to
yeah,
cool
yeah,
it.
yeah,
Remember
yeah,
that?
yeah,
And they did that for children.
they did, and these babies had bottles of tea, right?
Actually, Mum said we were drinking tea at the age of 3
Yeah,
or
we all
something.
were. Yeah, we all. But I think that was to warm us up, though.
It was, but it was also kind of being convivial and looking after. Everyone was included in the communitas of tea. Tea was our ritual.
thought,
We're all sitting down. But the other thing, I suppose, is that people put in the milk sometimes first, not to, if they had a good cup.
Yeah.
The milk was so that the hot tea wouldn't break the cup. And my own my partner Maura's mum, Kay Sheehan. By the way, yesterday she was 94 years
Oh,
of
well,
age. Right?
happy
Congratulations
Yeah,
and
she
happy
went down.
birthday.
Fantastic
Oh.
woman, but she would be English, and she would always put the milk in. It was, and if you didn't put the milk in, she wouldn't drink the tea at all.
Okay, so
It
that was the way to
it was
do it.
the way to it.
Ritual.
Ritual. Then it was the sugar, right?
Yeah.
And when you think about it, as a child, we'd be going up to the shop for bags of sugar every second day because we were consuming sugar like nothing else.
With nothing else though, Shane. We weren't using, there was no sugar in anything else
No,
in our
no
lives.
sugars.
No,
Yeah,
But you know, you also had this case that there was so much sugar inside the cup of tea that when you finished it, there'd be undissolved sugar at the bottom.
Yeah, yeah.
And one of the favourite things then was to
Scooping up.
you'd be scooping out.
People are watching and they think, you know what, where are those, like, did they come out of a cave, those
No,
trees?
no.
It seems like
But Mark,
millions
this
of
isn't
years
too long ago.
I
This is the
know.
thing. This is not too long ago at all.
We still love that, you know.
Yeah.
We still love all
Would you,
of
would
that.
you drink tea out of pottery?
Yeah, out of pottery.
Yeah, out of pottery cup.
Or Douth.
De-
No.
yeah, there would be.
I don't like it out of pottery.
I remember. You remember the willow?
No, I don't.
out of like, rather than a china cup or something
Yeah,
like that.
I like tea out of china
Yeah,
cup now.
that's
yeah.
right.
Tea's
yeah.
nicer out of a
But
china
you know,
cup.
you had the old Arklow pottery, which
That's
was
right.
the
Back in every house.
willow pattern
Yeah.
one. You had the blue band and you had
Yeah.
a brown band as well. You had all of that sort of idea. But you know, it's interesting about tea. This is my teapot. I brought it in to show to you
Yeah.
because even though it might look very grand, you know, this was the silver teapot that my mother Eleanor had at home. It was never ever used. But what I found so interesting about it was that I said, okay, when I inherited it, I said, this will become my everyday.
And have you used it?
I've used it all the
Fair
time.
play to you.
Yeah.
But to get it into use, Mara, I had to continually make tea in it to get the tannins to coat the inside of the teapot. And I have a great friend in America, Mike Slattery, who came over, and he's fastidiously clean. And what did he do? But he looked at the teapot and he looked into it and he said, God, that's filthy altogether. And he got the scrubbing brush and he scrubbed
no.
it.
He undid him on the ears work.
So I still laugh about that, and I was on to recently
You're right,
reminding
because you have to coat it to make it
you
almost like
do.
a vessel for tea.
But there's something great about having a pot of tea, you know, and I love the
And you're right. And as though he said, going back and actually making it with the tea leaves, the taste is so different.
At home, just try it for the weekend.
And it's a thing now.
Oh, seriously.
Now we need these kind of rituals because we're all at home.
Yeah. Shane,
Shane, great to have you as always. It's brilliant.
We'd be kind of more of gone tea with Shane as well, wouldn't we?
Marv got Shane, it's true.
Marv got Shane.
Marv got Shane. Yeah, that's the way we see it. And Marv got Billy Keane. We'll have to put that to him, though, because he's coming up with a few stories. We'll have to ask him certainly about the tea. He'll be coming up really soon with us.
Yeah, and of course, people are getting married in lockdown, but no hair salon.